Welcome to my walkthrough for UCAT Quantitative Reasoning. Do subscribe for more of these walkthroughs on different sections and to follow me on my journey as a medical student. So these graph questions are very easy to gain marks on. So for example, because we have car A and car B, you know that in a velocity time graph, the gradient of a velocity time graph would equal your acceleration. But even if you forgot that, in this question it tells you the equation anyway, so that's fine. Exactly, so that's actually fine. So for car A, we know, you just make a triangle out of each one. So for car A, we know that the maximum velocity is 16 and the time is 4. So for car A, the acceleration would be 16 divided by 4, which would be 4. So that would be 4 meters per second squared. And for car B, we know that there is no change within the acceleration because the gradient is 0, which means that would be 0. So that means that the answer is A, because it is A is 4 greater in acceleration than B. These questions come up quite a lot and they're very easy questions to gain marks on, so please do look at velocity time graphs. Okay, so first do identify all the important information in the question. So for example, over here it says that this graph shows Linda's first year scores. So you do need to remember that just in case you mix up, because the other options in the other options of these questions and the answers, the actual options do try and account for mistakes that you've made. For example, if you assume this is second year and you make a mistake, they already have answers which correspond to that mistake. So you won't think you've made a mistake because that answer that you've got is in the options, but it's actually wrong. So do be careful. Okay, so in P5, she scored 99 points. However, what's the difference between her P5 score in second year, which is already 99 points, as they've already told us, and her average project score in first year? So the second piece of information is what we need to find out. That's actually what we don't know. So if we look at this, to find an average, you have to add all of the options and divide by however many there are. So that's just the formula for averages in general. So you add all the options and then you divide by the number of options. So in this case you do 98 plus 92 plus 97 plus 18, 9 divided by 4, and that will give you an answer of 94. So now what you have to do is, it's just the difference, and difference basically means subtraction. So you know that's 99 and you minus it from 94. And the answer is 5 points, so therefore the answer is D. Okay, so from the looks of this question, you might think that like the longer questions are harder to understand, or like they're more difficult in difficulty, but that's not always the case. Like some of the longer written questions are actually the easier ones where you can actually gain good marks. So I would say that, like, don't skip them or anything like that. Okay, so we can start reading this then. So 33.33% of the audience who tuned into program 1. So now you just like label and do little arrows whenever you're reading something to make sure that it registers within your brain that you're looking at a different row again. So this is for any question, like try and do labels, circle things, do things like that. It really does help. Okay, so program 1, and so it says if 33.33% of the audience who tuned into program 1 via Cindy's again switched to program 4, what would be the number of audience who tuned into program 4? Okay, so we need to know 3 things here. We need to know what is the percentage, like what the number actually is. That's a very bad underlining technique. So we need to know 3 things here. We need to know this 33.33%. We need to work that out for the people who've tuned into program 1 through Cindy's just normally, usually. So we do 1.6 for that, right? And then the second thing we need is that we need to work out the number of audience who tuned into program 4 through Cindy's already, like right now, how many do, and then you can work out the difference. So if you work out the first one, that would be 1.6 equals x divided by that times by 100, and then that would be the same thing, 1.6 divided by 100 times by 10500. You'd get 168 for that. So So you know that 33%, 33.33% of that. So you'll just find that. You would just type in 0.333 on the calculator. You know that it's 55.99 for that. And that's basically 56. You know that 56 is the number of people who do watch program 1 through Cindy's. So you're saying 56 people from here would go to program 4. So you need to add this new value, because this is the new participants that have switched. You need to add that new value to the old value of program 4. So now when you work out program 4's value, that would be the same method. So 3.6 and you would get 90. So then basically, you know that program 4 had 90 people before, okay? So originally program 4 has 90 people who are watching program 4 through Cindy's. So you know that the audience who have switched, that audience is 56, which we've already worked out. So you would just have to add the two numbers together, and then that would be 146. So instead of so I would say that you need to cut down your steps, right? So you can do 90 plus 60 in your head, which is basically 150. So you don't need to be really good at mental maths. You just need to round a little bit, because these numbers over here, they are very, very different from each other. So even if you do 90 plus 60, that's 150. So that's the same as this, right? Obviously it would be that. But also, if you do want to check that your answer is right because you've gotten the same answer, then you would type it onto the calculator. But when you practice more questions, your speed will increase quite a lot, and you'll get used to these kind of this kind of rounding and this kind of adding. So when I first actually saw this question, I got a bit confused. This is the second part of the question that we did earlier, and what confused me was that I assumed that we've already calculated the number of audience in the previous question over here. But the problem is that it's not. One of the answers does result in that. If you do work it out that way, then one of the answers does result in that. However, you don't want to make that mistake. So that's an easy mistake. So people think that, oh yeah, I've already calculated the number for Cindy's, that column anyway, so I can just use that to work out a percentage. But that's not true. You have to work it out again using the same method that we did in the previous question. So this is program 2. So make sure you don't make mistakes like that. Make sure you're looking at the right column and the right row. That's the reason why they give you 5 different programs, so you do get confused. So don't make that mistake. Anyway, so then Cindy's is 3 this time. So the rating would be 3. And then the number of audience is what we're trying to work out again, X. And then the population would be 9,400 in this case. So in the same way, if we work that out, what we are going to get is 282. So we know that the audience for this is 282. Now the thing is that we know that 24.8% are female, but now we need to find how many are male. So what I could do is that I could find 24.8% of 242, and then I could subtract the answer I get from 282 to work out the remaining number of males. And that's what you would usually do. But the quicker way is if you minus the percentage already. So if you work this out on your calculator, that's much faster, because you know that the remaining percentage is males. Percentages do add up to 100, right? So to work that out, you would get 75.2%. And when you get 75.2%, what you can do is the same thing. So you just do 0.752 times by 282, and you get 212. So you get 212, and that's the answer. So E is the answer. So you just start working it out, and then when you work it out, you get it's the same kind of method for this question as well. So because first we look at the question, we see 28,950. So first we have to look at the question. So we see that there is 28,950, and that falls into which bracket? It falls into the second row. So because that falls into the second row, we know that £895 is the first is the first initial total tax paid. So what we have to do is subtract. So we have to subtract 28950 from 8950, because we know that the tax paid on that initial 8,950 is 865. So the question is that we need to work out the remaining tax. So we know that on all of that first initial income, that first initial 8,950, there is a 10% tax rate, which, and obviously it's the upper limit, so it will be £895 fully for that. So when you subtract that, you get £20,000. And because you get £20,000, now I know that we have a 15% tax rate on this. So if you do 15% of this, so usually what people do is that they type it into their calculator. However, what I do is I find 10% first, which is much easier. So if you find 10% first, you basically take off a 0. So that's 2,000. And then if you want to find 5%, that would be 1,000, because it would be half of 2,000. And then that means 15% would be 3,000. And because 15% would be 3,000, 3,000 is that other tax rate. Therefore, this means that we know that in the second annual taxable income bracket, the second row in this table, we are going to have 3,000, whereas the upper limit was 4,990. So what we tried to find was how much tax would the bill have to pay for that specific bracket. So we know that he's going to pay 895 for the first row, like fully, because that he has hit the limit, which is 8,950. And then in addition to that 895, he's going to pay this new amount, which is 3,000, which we have worked out for the second row. And if you add that, you get option B, 3895. Now, because the UCAT is a very time-pressured exam, we know that it would be hard to do this very quickly. However, this sentence is very key. This sentence tells you what to do. So this is the equivalent of this. So what have you done to this? So if I didn't understand, I would see that where did they get 60,000 from? Where did they get that 4,990 from? They got that from the second row and the last one, because for that one, it was the third row, and you look at the previous row to see the maximum bracket for the previous row. So for that one, it was the third row, therefore we used 4,990, whereas for this new question, which is bill, for bill, we had to use the second row, which is why we looked at the first row and we used 895. And then we know that we did we subtracted these two. So in the same way, what we did over here is we subtracted these two. So you should use these things as a guide. And if you're running out of even more time, what I would suggest is do more rounding, because if you do more rounding, you do see that majority of these answers have a difference of $1,000. So even if you do round, it should not be an issue. Even if you round, you probably will get approximately closer to the answer that you want to get to. You'll probably get about 3,000 something-ish. So even then, you'll still guess 3,000, which makes sense. So if you have a pause and have a read of this question, the main thing that you'll notice is that if you look at both the entities that the question is talking about, so it's talking about nickel and talking about copper. So you know that in this table there is only nickel. So you need to do something to add copper also into the table. So since there's no copper in the table, now we know that obviously if it's only made of nickel and copper, and there's 25% of nickel in coin A, there must be 75% of copper. And then the same thing in coin B, because there is 16% of nickel in coin B, we will know that there must be 84% of copper in coin B. So now we've added this to the table. Now it's easier for us to work out the weight of copper present in coin B and the weight of copper present in coin A. So we want the difference, and we don't know this, and we also don't know this. We also don't know the weight of copper in coin A. So we don't know these two things. So if we work out them one by one, we know that in coin B, if I want to work out the weight of copper, I have to do 75%, which is basically 3/4, times by 6.5 grams. And you should already be able to calculate these kind of things very quickly in your head. So for that, it would be 4.875. And then for coin A, we would Sorry, that was meant for coin A. And for coin B, we would do the same thing again. We would do 84% times by 5. And it's kind of the same thing in this scenario. Like, you would do 84% in your calculator because that's kind of hard to calculate. The other thing that you could do is find 85%, which might be easier without a calculator. But having it exact is a bit better in this scenario because the options are very close in terms of how far away they are. And then you just subtract these two and you get 0.675. So that's answer D. So these kind of table questions, they always try to make one entity missing so that you just have to fill that in. And when you read this for the first time, it gets very confusing, like what is it talking about, what coin and stuff like that. But just make sure you try and understand what's missing, because when you work out what's missing in the table, then you'll understand how to actually calculate the answer for the question. So basically for this question, what we have to do is that they want to find out the total number who have tuned into program 3. So then you're looking at this row, you already know that. And then the problem with that is that you want the total number, right? But only this, you have to look for the columns that show you the number. So only that column shows you the number of the audience, but this column does not show number, that shows rating. So why don't we just start with the column that shows us the number? So because these two columns show us number, what we're going to do is we're going to add this number to this number. So if you do 567 plus 594, that's 1161. So then what you have to do is that you want to find the number of audience, like for the rating, right? So the problem is that like these two columns have just given us the rate, that's literally just given us the ratings, but we want to calculate the total number of audience. Since we want to find the ratings, if we look at Cindy's column, you know that it's 2 over there. So we're going to just substitute into that equation that they've given us. And the fact that they've given us this equation means that we actually are going to have to use it, right? So what we're going to do is just put 2. So for Cindy's, the rating is 2. And then for number of audience tuned in is... that's what we want to find out. So that's X, and then you have your population, which is for that row, that is 1,300. That's the answer. And you times it by 100, and then you basically just rearrange the equation to just find it out, I guess, in a way. So that would be, and that would give you X. So that would give you this number over here. So what we would do for that is you just put that in your calculator. You get 270, and now I do the same thing again, but I do it with the others. And the reason, the one mistake that people might make in this is that they might do 2 plus 2.2, but that's not the same, because since it's an equation, you cannot actually substitute 2 plus 2.2. So you can't substitute 4 because that's a rating. If it was a number, you could have added them, but because it's a rating, so not really. So if you ignore that, then what you're going to have to do now is that you do the same thing for the others. So you would put 2.2 here, and then you would put the same population because it's the same row, and then that would also be and then for Y, your value would be 297. So we already know that our value for this means that we already know our value for the first two columns is 1161. So that's 1161. So we have to just add that to X and Y. So if you just add these numbers onto your calculator, that'd be 1728. So that would be answer D. So the thing with this question is that obviously you're not going to know what the answer is, and even if you needed to guess, then you wouldn't really know. But if you think about it, and if you add 567 and 594, if you add these two columns, then you already know that it's 1161. However, you know that it can't be the first answer because obviously, like, you're literally discounting this information. So you can already exclude this answer. And then obviously if you don't have enough time and you work out one of these, then you might be able to exclude another answer. So for example, if I didn't have time to work out y, then I could just exclude this answer, because if I do 1161 added to 270 and I don't add it to 297, I get 1431, which means I can't be B as well, because there's just no way it's B. So it's like beyond that point, right? So you would guess between C, D, and E, and like that's just much easier in terms of gaining marks. So try and exclude answers wherever you can. If you can't complete the whole question, then you might as well. But do try and aim to complete the whole question if it's an easy question. And that's it for this question, really. That's how you do it. So the first step is that you see that there are already ratings for these two columns. So what you would do is that, it's program 2 versus program 1. So I'll just personally add these two. So that would be 2 and then that would be 4. Now all we have to do is work out the overall ratings for network and for cable. So the thing is that with these kind of questions, it's very, very much with the speed that you do it in, and in terms of the accuracy as well. So for network, what you would do is just substitute. And I do the same thing for the cable column. So that would be 3.8, and then I add all of them. So I do 2 plus 3.8 plus 7.2, which would basically be 13. And then that's for program 1. And then I calculate program 2. And then for the cable column, and then I add all of them again. The answer for that is 15. So it's 15 for the program. It's 15 for program 2, and it's 13 for program 1. So the difference is basically 2. And if you wanted to guess this kind of question and just exclude answers straight away, I would say you would know to exclude the first and the second one, because the rating for the program 1 and program 2 is already so different. So as you see, it's 2 for program 1 and then it's 4 for program 2. So the fact that like getting a rating is so different in program 2, you already know that it can't be such a small difference, and also that the numbers are very, very close to each other for the network and the cable. So it wouldn't really be enough for program 1 to make up for program 2's greater numbers in the other columns. That's why I would exclude the first two, and then I would choose between the last 3 if I had to guess this kind of question. But with this question, it's very, very much to do with speed. Another way you could do this is just do it in your head. So for example, you could just round the numbers when you're working it out, but there's always a slight risk with that. So obviously for this question, I would do the same thing. I would just label the columns that I'm working on. I mean the rows that I'm working on. So for example, I know that I'm working on Earth, and then the Mercury is a row that's not really there. But then you do know that Venus is also something that I'm looking at. So obviously you know that Venus is halfway between the temperature on the Earth and the temperature on Mercury. So because it's halfway, you work out the difference. So that would be 460. So the difference between Earth and Venus is 460, and that's halfway between Mercury and Earth. So then you would just times that by 2. Which would be 920. And then the thing with that is that you know that Mercury would obviously be this added to the temperature of the Earth. So that would be 20 plus 920, which would be 940, which is option E. And obviously you know this already, because you can, so with this question you can just exclude very, very easily. And the way you exclude it is obviously you know that without even doing the calculation, I would just know that the answer is E. And the way I would know that is because obviously the temperature between Venus it's just halfway. So the temperature on Mercury must be way greater than Venus if Venus is on the halfway point. So this is Earth, and this is Mercury, which is where you want to get. And obviously the question has told you that it's Venus is halfway, so the temperature on Mercury must be greater than the temperature on Venus. And you know that the temperature on Venus is 480. Which one of these values is greater than 480? It's only the last one, so that's literally the answer. So without even doing the calculation, you would know by a process of exclusion that that's the right answer. So in the UCAT, I would say that you should focus on these kind of questions, which are very, very easy to get marks. Get all these easy marks in the bag, and then you can obviously go back to the questions that you struggled with or that you found harder. You should become very, very good at identifying which questions are easy and which questions are hard. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please subscribe if you want to see more of these.